va vous être présenté par Tahir et Koen.
Hi everyone, so yeah, I'm back again. So my team in London, we actually manage not only Google Analytics, we manage Google Tag Manager as well. So today we're going to talk about Google Tag Manager and actually show you a live demo of how it works. So hopefully if you've never used it before, you can see how easy it is to use. And then we can show you some kind of advanced things that are possible. So title of the talk is Set Your Data Free with Google Tag Manager. The idea is that you don't need to be kind of locked in once you've kind of shipped your apps. So we're going to show you how and why that's possible. So I'll probably start off with talking about why Google Tag Manager or tag management in general. So if you think about the following types of technology, we have everything here from analytics to AdWords to different email tagging campaigns. They all have one thing in common. They all require some kind of tag or SDK to be implemented on your site or app. Obviously, when you've got a lot of sites or a lot of different technologies and new technologies are coming, this can become quite difficult to manage. You have to go back and forth with your developers to get these things implemented. I mean, if you've kind of done tagging here before, you probably know about these problems. Also, the landscape is getting, I wouldn't say a lot worse, a lot bigger. But that means if you're the person looking after tags or looking after these different technologies, it starts to get more and more complicated. So this is there's a website called Chief Mark Tech for marketing technology. And they did kind of a surveying collection of all the different marketing technology companies out there. So you can see in 2012, they found around 350 different companies. Since then, the whole kind of data and marketing world has got bigger and bigger. And now you're seeing something like over 1,800 different marketing technology companies, and all of them pretty much requiring some kind of tagging or API connection to work. So you can see things are becoming a lot more complicated. So as I mentioned, one of the problems is that once your website or app ships, it becomes kind of locked in with what's on the site. As a marketing person, that can be quite frustrating because you have this new technology, you have this new campaign, and you're relying on your developers to kind of get those changes out there. Luckily, with things like Google Tag Manager, that changes. So you can start to kind of set things up so that you can start to use your data whenever you want to use that data. So you're not relying on your developers anymore or your IT team. Vice versa, if you are the developer, you haven't got your marketing person kind of after you to set something new up. So Koen, my colleague Koen, is going to come up and show you a demo of how Google Tag Manager works. The whole idea is that you install Google Tag Manager once in your app or on your website. You can then configure tags when you want, and then you can test and publish and test that all at the same time, or from the Google Tag Manager interface. So Koen, do you want to come up?
All right. So yeah, when you get started with Google Tag Manager, it's quite different from regular websites, because before Google Tag Manager, you'd deploy a large amount of tags deployed in different ways, which made it for very inconsistent, a lot of inconsistency. So that's why with Google Tag Manager, you start in a different way. With Google Tag Manager, we start by designing a data layer. The data layer is basically something that's holding all of your tags, and the tags in the data layer can be fired with by triggering them. And in the data layer, you would pass variables, which then would be sent to either Google Analytics, for example, or anything else. The way to do that would be, so we would start with the data layer, and we would create a container. Container is basically the most fundamental part of your Google Analytics account. You set up a container, and in that container, you configure whatever you want to fire, whatever tag you want to fire, and when you want to have it fired. So, for example, if we would get started by setting up a website with Google Tag Manager, we would first start by making a variable. This variable would contain the information that we actually want to send. And when do we want to send it is by making a trigger. So when we make a trigger, we're basically setting up a rule. So if this happens, then you should fire this variable. And the trigger, that mainly contains a variable as well, because, for example, you would trigger something if a variable is this or a variable is that. Or if, for example, your event will contain a certain name. Then all that information that you just created will be wrapped around in a tag, and this tag will fire once the tag meets the correct triggers. So when you have that set up, you're ready to test it and publish it. And yeah, we're actually going to do that now. So this is what I want to set up. And the way that I would do that is by going into my Tag Manager account. Just fire this up for a sec. Let's make it a bit bigger. We go into this one. Currently, I have set up a new account with an empty container. And just going to enlarge this for a second. All right. What we do next is we would go in here, and just as I said right back, we would start by setting up a variable. So as you can see, we have some built-in variables already. For example, an app ID or an app name, an app version code, or an app version name. The enabled built-in variables differ when you set up a container for a web. This one is specifically set up for Android. So, and one other one which is very useful is the event, which will automatically collect the event name that you pass into the data layer. So if we would want to set up what we just saw, was basically a variable which contained a level name. So if you were designing an app, a game, and you'd have different levels, and those levels have names, then you want to fire a certain name. And so if I would want to have this name come up in the data layer, I would declare it as a data layer variable. And I would say this is called level name. And then I would create the variable and, for example, name the variable level name. Next, I would want a certain trigger to tell a tag to fire once I fire it. And this trigger would, for example, be when a player fills a level. So once the level gets filled, then we want to send to Google Analytics, for example, which level that was. So the level name, or well, the event in this case, we would want to have an event which equals level filled. And we could set it up like this. Fires when level is filled. OK, so then we have our triggers. And now we actually want to have a tag which is going to fire everything. And the tag would be named. For example, for this one, we would create a Google Analytics variable. You can implement it with a lot of different ways. Google Tag Manager for web actually has a lot more built-in products. But for now, we're going to use Google Analytics. And if we would have a tracking ID, it would, for example, be something like this. And then I would say, OK, this is an event. And the event is going to contain the actual event. And then for our action, we are going to pass in our just created level name, which is right here. And so if we have everything like this, then we would now send a tag which contains the event name and our level name. And we only want this certain tag to be fired once a user fills a level. So we are going to trigger it when a level is filled. So save it, create the tag, and I'm going to name this level filled. OK, so now you have everything set up, but you want to actually let something happen in your app. So that's, don't know why this is taking so long. OK. So how would we, for example, go about that? We would have a function called push level filled event. And what we would push into the data layer, first we get the data layer for our setup tag manager instance. Then we go and push an event to the data layer, which is called level filled. So that satisfies our trigger. And then level name, which passes our level name variable in there. OK. So, and one of the main benefits for like setting up a lot of different things is with the Google Tag Manager, you can also easily manage like a whole lot of tags by really simply creating a folder. So if we would, for example, want to do that, we would go into our Tag Manager account and set all of make a new folder. And we would say, for example, our level filled folder. So everything that happens when and comes to mind when a level is filled. And we would want to move these into our level filled. So this can be very useful if you have a lot of tags deployed. All right. So with this, what you can do with this is you can, for example, set up a lot of different tags when you first create your app and set a lot of different things that will be sent to Google Tag Manager. And you don't, for example, want to do something with it right now. But you can configure and change everything around after your app is released without actually updating your app. So that's a very good freedom thing. What you could also do with Google Tag Manager is instead of firing tags is actually collecting information. So if I would, for example, set up something that's called with value collection, then I could get a lot of different settings, variables, or whatever from Google Tag Manager. So in that case, you could actually use it as a sort of small CMS, which actually controls things happening in your app or in your website. So if I would have, for example, want to set the difficulty of a level, of a game, and I would want to change it over time, I could do that with Google Tag Manager. Could also actually set a lot of different things. So for example, if I would have, if I would want to change, for example, for a specific campaign, the amount of coins that someone gets, then we would could, for example, change the amount of coins that someone gets per win by using it in Google Tag Manager. We could also do stuff to the UI and to the text. So if we have a value collection tag in a variable in Google Tag Manager, it would look something like this. You'd have a JSON object, which basically contains whatever you want to put in there. So if you would want to change something in your app, so if you have a few basic strings in your app that you want to change around, then you could do that by adding them from the Google Tag Manager account instead of having to hard code them or setting up an API or a server for that. A different thing is also, for example, changing the language of your app. And we're actually going to check that out for a sec. So I've already set this up for this demo. And what we basically have is we have a few variables deployed for this. So this is pretty basic. In our English text variable, which is a value collection variable, as you can see, we have a few values, one value, which is called welcome text, and it says hello. And for my French text, I also have the same welcome text, and then bonjour. And if I would want to change around my language, I could change it around here in my language data layer variable. So the default value that I've set for this one is English, so EN. And as you can see in our value collection variable English text, this one is going to fire when this trigger, language is English, is met. So language equals EN. And the same will be for our French one with languages FR. So if we would have this in a bit of code, then I could actually change some things around. Currently, I'm not setting the language myself, so it's just going to get the default value which I set in Google Tag Manager. So if I would run this one, and I'd launch an emulator, which I thought I'll. So this is going to take a bit because the Android emulator isn't that fast. Oh, it really has to start up. So I'm actually going to get into the code for one more second. So what we're doing here, right here, is we're just addressing our, first of all, we're getting our data layer variable, and then, which is the data layer for our Google Tag Manager instance. And then we're just going to push something and change the language to EN, and that's what we're going to do in a minute. So if I would change this around, and if we, for example, have a lot of languages in there, then we could set it to NL or FR. Obviously, if you'd have to change it in your code again, then there is no benefit at all, but this could, for example, happen when the user configures their own app. Sorry, this is taking a bit long. It seems my other one has crashed. Lovely. How many people here work with the Android emulator every now and then? I think some people, yeah, probably are familiar with this problem. Prefer to do it on a device, but it's not going to happen now. Actually want to do your thing first, maybe?
If it's not loading.
Yeah, it seems it's not loading, so maybe we can get on with Tahir's bit first. All right.
Cool.
Thank you for now, and we may come back to
it. Cool. So one of the things we try and obviously do at Google is combine the different technologies. Another Google product you might have heard of is Google BigQuery. If you haven't, it's kind of Google's big data solution. So we have clients that are pushing their analytics data into BigQuery, pushing different types of data. And one of the things we were trying to do is seeing how can we make use of that data. So obviously it's going to be used for analysis, but we thought how can we try and bring that data back into our apps or back into our websites. So one of the prototypes we've been working on is building these BigQuery-powered widgets and serving them back into the page, serving these widgets into your web page using Google Tag Manager. So the way it works is we have our table in BigQuery. We write a SQL query to get that data. The nice thing with this is that if you've got millions and millions of data points, as you might have, then it'll be really quick. So it's designed to analyze big data sets really fast. Next thing is we've got Google App Engine. Does anyone use App Engine here? Cool. So great thing with App Engine is that it integrates with the Google products really well. So if you've tried to integrate with one of the Google APIs, you'll notice that it's really very easy to do with a few lines of code. So to connect to BigQuery is quite simple. And the final thing we're going to do is we're going to build. It's going to turn the BigQuery database into our own API on top of App Engine, and then we're going to serve that API into Google Tag Manager by removing any kind of sensitive information from that return data set and serve that into our page. So the way we can do that is, I'll show you kind of a quick demo as well. So I'm doing a few things there. So this specific client has Google Analytics premium data pushed into BigQuery. So we're getting all of their web hit data to work out the top authors on their site. And we're joining that with a table which has an author. So we're getting the page views from the data, the web data, and we're getting a lookup table that has the page names and the author. And then from that, we're joining and calculating the top authors. So I'll make sure that's not cached. So we'll see kind of how that works. Hopefully not too long. So you can see now from that, we've got a list of our top authors. Next thing we can do we can then pull that into App Engine. So as I mentioned, the kind of code to do it is not too complicated. So the first thing we'll do is going to authenticate with BigQuery using a service account. So you put the email, the service account email, if anyone's used developer tools. You gave that permission to the BigQuery account, and that kind of takes care of it being able to access the data. And then we're going to create a class that is connecting to BigQuery. You can see I've written query here, so you can imagine that's got a string that holds your actual SQL query. And we're going to output the results into a JSON format. And that's going to give us something that looks like that. So now we've got this, our own API, which only has the information that we want to show. We can do anything we want with that. So what we're going to do is create a custom HTML tag in Google Tag Manager. So I'll just go back over. So when you go to create a tag, you have different options. You can create normal tags, but you can also do custom HTML and image tags. So in this scenario, we're doing a custom HTML tag. And then I've written, this is probably a bit more kind of complicated code, but essentially what it's doing, it's calling the API, matching the styling off the web page, and building that widget. So instead of putting the kind of CSS logic into App Engine, I'm actually just doing that all in Google Tag Manager, so I can change that when I like. And then I'm setting a rule for that to fire based on certain logic. So if you go to the site now, you can see there's kind of nothing there. We've just got our normal website. What I want to do is maybe after the second article, insert this top authors widget. So I can preview this, so I don't actually have to publish it first. And that's going to put me into preview and debug mode. And if I reload that, you should hopefully see, oh, yeah, this top authors widget now injected into the page. So you can see with that, using 3 bits of technology, it's not actually too difficult to build kind of dynamic data to go back into your app or site using your own analytics data. And that is it. Thank you. Shall we try go back to yours, or
yeah, we can
let's have a look if it's loaded.
Give it a try.
If not, then we can answer any questions.
Yeah, it's not happening.
I don't think we're having any luck. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, this is actually a simple one. how much does BigQuery and App Engine cost?
So
yeah, you might say, go have a look at the website.
Yeah, no. It's so the actual cost for BigQuery are pretty cheap for what we can do. So you get up to 5 terabytes a month of analysis for free. The storage fee, I think, is 0.2 cents per gigabyte per month. So yeah, so you can store 100 gigabytes for $2 a month.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
And App Engine, I will have to say, have a look, because I'm not 100% sure. I know there's a free allocation. And if someone else here from the team might be able to answer the kind of more paid costs for that. So yeah.
Sure.
And yeah, Google Tag Manager free though. So yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. You're welcome. Cool.
All right.
Demo is crashed, really?
Unfortunately,
it seems that it's not starting up now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry for
that.
Thank you very much, Tahir.
Oh.
Pardon? More
Yeah.
questions?
Me? Okay. I have one question, but it's more about analytics and not tag manager, if it's okay.
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to know, I know that Google policy in analytics is that we shouldn't put user recognizable
PII
content in analytics directly.
Yeah.
Is that enforced?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so yeah, you're not allowed any PII information, and if Google see it's in your account, then you'll have all of your data deleted. So yeah.
Okay, but so for example, in one of your demo, you were putting the first name and last name of the author of articles on your site.
Yeah.
That's okay to do it. That's okay to do, but
yeah.
Every recognizable information, but from people in our team, it's okay to put it in analytics. But
yeah, I mean, so the difference with that is information about the content, not the user.
Okay.
So it's someone viewing a page by this author. So a name is fine in that context. But if you're tying that to, if you're, for example, putting a name next to a cookie and it's a different name for every user, then that is classed as PII. So there is like, they obviously look at the context of which you're using the data. So something like that would be perfectly fine because it's meta information about the content.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I met with a game developer who was building his own backend for his game because he had a very specific usage, is that his marketing people wanted to change the logic for in-app purchase campaigns. They wanted to change the if then that, then I push this kind of in-app promotion and so on. Is this something they could have built with Tag Manager?
Yeah, definitely. So that is exactly the use case for the feature that Kuhn was showing, so that you can have these kind of JSON objects. It's not the kind of tidiest platform to use because it kind of relies on you having a JSON object in that variable, but it is the exact use case for that. So you can define the different types of, like you said, the different points you get for certain things.
But here I've seen you can change the number of coins you get in some event from 2 to 100.
Yeah.
But can you change the logic of if he reaches level 70 but cannot get to level 71 7 times, then I offer him the bigger bazooka that would help him to get there?
Okay, yeah. I think in that scenario, you would have to kind of have it kind of thought out in kind of having the different steps. So you can have a variable that looks at another variable that looks at another variable. So you can kind of have it nested. So I think that would be possible, but you'd have to kind of write the if this rules yourself. You can't write any kind of like if-then logic in the actual code. You would have to have kind of predefined values, so like 10, 20, 30, etc.
Yeah, and do I get enough information about the users to be able to send those promotions to specific users, or at least specific cohorts of users?
I mean, yes, you wouldn't be able to target specific users, but you could, so for example, if you sent in and said you had one JSON object that said numbers 1 to 100, and you had another one that says levels 1 to 10, and then you have 2 values for each of those, you would have to just pass in those 2 values in the data layer to kind of create this new value. So it is a bit more complicated, but I think it will be possible, but you won't be able to kind of write like programmatically if this, then that kind of rules.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, cool.
Hi, you showed us how to use GTM like a CMS, but is it something that you would really advise, like putting all static text into GTM?
It really depends on the amount of text that you have. If you have like a regular content website, then you would not per se want that, because the JSON objects would become just fast, and that's not something that you'd want. It's more, if you'd, for example, want to do that with text, that would be pretty useful for game developers who have a considerably less amount of text than, for example, a publisher or something. So yeah, it's definitely whatever fits your case best, and large amounts of content aren't super easy to manage that way, but it can be done, definitely.
There is one other kind of thing tied to that is using Google Analytics content experiments. So you can kind of do A/B testing as well. So if you wanted to test the text of a button, you could, instead of just having that JSON object with the different values, you can tie it in with Google Analytics and content experiments, and then have 3 different variations that are being tested, and then the winning result is displayed.
Actually, if we just pack, do you send all the variable at once, or is it something like one round trip for each variable? So it might be very slow, or?
I think it downloads the full container every time. So if you do have, it wouldn't be advisable to have a really big variable with a lot of information. It is kind of designed for kind of reasonable amounts of data. So yeah, it will download everything.
Yeah.
Because it downloads the full container every time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
You could, if you would want to like manage it and keep it small, you can actually use multiple containers, but it's not really advisable because it will make everything just slower. And so. All right.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Tahir et Kun. Merci. Bon, on va pouvoir rigoler maintenant.